The investigation of uncertainty, especially surrounding a highly publicized and devastating event, often circles back to seemingly minute details that refuse to fit the established narrative. We've circled this timeline for months, but one moment keeps resurfacing: the pineapple. Not because it's extraordinary, but because its presence reshapes everything we thought we knew. If digestion tells time, then the story we were told begins to shift, becoming instead a chronology defined by confusion and contradiction. 1. The object, a forensic anchor in chaos. In an attempt to understand the final hours of the young victim's life, the simple acidic fruit discovered during the forensic examination immediately transcended its identity, evolving into a fundamental source of investigative focus. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation Laboratory report documents the submission of numerous items related to the case. An autopsy report section describing the microscopic details reveals that the proximal portion of the small intestine contained fragmented pieces of vegetable or fruit material, which may represent fragments of pineapple. The nature of the discovery elevated this fruit from a routine snack food to a potential forensic clock, forcing investigators and the family alike to account for its late-night presence. On the morning of December 26, 1996, the crime scene itself presented physical evidence corresponding to this discovery. The 1998 interview transcript with Lou Smith and Mike Kane confirms that a large bowl of what appeared to be pineapple, complete with a serving spoon, was found left out on a kitchen or dining room table. Patsy Ramsey's attorney, Pat Burke, mentions this clue in the 1997 Boulder police interview when urging John Ramsey to answer verbally because the interview was being recorded. John Ramsey, in his 1998 interview, describes the bowl as huge with a big serving spoon, which he recognized as potentially one of their bowls. The presence of the bowl was dramatically out of the ordinary, requiring immediate attention. In the 1998 interview transcript, John Ramsey conveys that he was puzzled by the bowl. From a forensic criminology perspective, physical evidence like the pineapple bowl represents what experts call a behavioral artifact, an unintentional trace left behind that reveals the actor's state of mind. The bowl wasn't hidden, it wasn't cleaned up. It sat there in plain view, suggesting either extreme confidence or complete chaos. Criminologists understand that perpetrators leave behind psychological signatures in how they interact with the crime scene. The bowl's placement, casual, domestic, unhurried, speaks to someone comfortable in that space, someone for whom the kitchen was not a foreign territory requiring caution. The fundamental conflict arising from the pineapple relates directly to the family's narrative of the evening. John Ramsey confirmed in his 1998 interview that they were asked if JonBenet had consumed pineapple because it was found in her system. In a 1997 interview transcript, John Ramsey recounts putting Burke to bed somewhere between 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. and then going right upstairs to bed. Crucially, John Ramsey stated in the 1998 interview that he could guarantee the fruit was not after she came home because she was sound asleep. Patsy Ramsey had also reportedly denied feeding her pineapple. The book excerpts mention that if the Ramseys had been trying to disguise something, they easily could have just claimed they fed her pineapple before bed, which would have ended the discussion, but they insisted they did not because it didn't happen after she went to bed. The failure to account for the pineapple's presence introduced an immediate, unavoidable gap in the timeline of events, casting the first shadow of doubt upon the stated hours of the family's night. Philosophically, this raises profound questions about truth and memory. When does a family's collective narrative become fixed? At what point does denial transform from protective instinct into something more problematic? The philosophy of knowledge, epistemology, teaches us that certainty is often an illusion, especially in moments of extreme stress. Yet here, the Ramseys expressed absolute certainty about something that biological evidence contradicted. This creates what philosophers call an epistemic crisis, a moment when what we claim to know collides with what can be demonstrated to be true. The discovery of the fruit, amidst the profound chaos of the morning, was a jarring intrusion of the mundane into the horrific, It demanded a logical timeline where one simply could not exist, transforming a bowl left on a counter into an undeniable question mark about the truth of the final moments. Here's where we need to examine something peculiar: the fixation on the serving spoon. John and even Patsy talk about the serving spoon being large and out of place. But think about this practically. Everyone has different sizes of spoons in their house, and sometimes all the small spoons are in the dishwasher or the sink, leaving only large spoons available. There's no mention that police looked in the dishwasher or checked the drawers to see what spoons were available. While that might seem tedious, it leaves open the possibility that a large spoon was simply what was accessible. But here's what doesn't make sense. How is a large spoon that comes from your own house out of place? Why are we making this into something significant? The main purpose should be determining when, where, and why JonBenet ate pineapple, yet John and Patsy redirect attention to a large spoon from their own home that they claim is unusual. This feels like misdirection, turning our focus toward an irrelevant domestic detail rather than the substantive question of timeline and consumption. This parallels the tea glass situation. The focus became that Burke's fingerprints were on the tea glass and the tea was completely consumed. The Ramseys claimed they don't drink tea in winter, but again, it's a cup from their house. So the implication we're meant to consider is that someone comfortable enough to enter their home would sit and drink tea in the middle of the night. This strains credibility. From an anthropological lens, we must consider domestic rituals and family patterns. Anthropologists study how families create and maintain routines, how they use domestic spaces, and what behaviors are considered normal versus aberrant within a household culture. The act of preparing food, especially a snack like pineapple, is deeply embedded in family dynamics. Who typically prepares snacks? Who serves whom? What does it mean when a child helps themselves versus when they're served? These seemingly trivial questions reveal power structures, care patterns, and the invisible architecture of family life. The only time an outside person would have had to prepare this snack would have been before the Ramseys returned from the dinner party. The argument could be made that perhaps they were oblivious. They came in through the back, took JonBenet upstairs. Patsy went to bed, but John came down the front stairs, so they didn't pass by the kitchen. This would mean whoever was eating pineapple and milk and drinking tea was startled when the family returned, got up quickly when they heard the garage door, and ran downstairs to the basement. They would have needed the light on, then turned it off, which means navigating a pitch dark basement as John describes it, requiring a flashlight or some way to guide their path once they heard that garage door. But does that scenario make sense? A perpetrator comfortable enough to sit and snack but panicked enough to flee to the basement? The behavioral profile doesn't align. This is where criminology meets psychology. Offender behavior must follow internal logic, even if that logic is disturbed. 2. The timing. When biology contradicts memory, the core significance of the pineapple lies in its location within the digestive tract, which acts as a rudimentary timepiece. In the documentary, experts discuss the physiological implications. Experts discuss the physiological implications. Documentary Henry Lee pointed out that the presence of the fruit in the small intestine meant it was way after the meal. Dr. Werner Spitz further elaborated that the presence of the pineapple in that location, combined with the successful digestion and evacuation of her dinner, eaten hours earlier at the White's home, indicated that the pineapple was ingested subsequently to the family returning home and putting JonBenet to bed. This scientific interpretation suggested consumption occurred hours after the family arrived back at 755 15th Street. Physiologically, the digestive timeline is remarkably reliable. The stomach empties at a predictable rate, and food moves through the small intestine following established patterns. When investigators find partially digested pineapple in the small intestine but not in the stomach, they can work backward to establish a consumption window. The pineapple acts as what forensic scientists call a biological timestamp. evidence that the body itself preserves and cannot lie about. The human digestive system typically takes 30 to 40 minutes for food to move from the stomach into the small intestine, though this varies based on numerous factors, including the type of food, the person's metabolic rate, emotional state, and physical activity. Acidic fruits like pineapple can move relatively quickly. However, the complete absence of dinner remnants, the cracked crab from the White's house, combined with the presence of only pineapple, suggests a significant time gap between the two meals. The fact that digestion had progressed sufficiently creates a direct conflict with the parental accounts. According to the 1997 interview transcript, John Ramsey stated he probably got Burke to bed somewhere between 9:30 p.m. and 10 to 10 inches, and then went right upstairs to bed himself. Patsy Ramsey, in her April 1997 interview, stated she was preparing to finish packing for the Charlevoix trip the morning of the 26th, likely throwing in toothbrushes and last-minute kind of stuff. John Ramsey strongly asserted in his 1998 interview that JonBenet was sound asleep when they returned home, and it had to be at the Whites, or prior to that, when she ate the fruit. However, the digestive evidence places the consumption late in the evening or in the early hours of the morning after the family's supposed sleep began. This is where I align completely with Dr. Henry Lee and Dr. Werner Spitz. The pineapple is an anchor. It confirms late night activity with certainty. I already believed there was late night activity because of the bathroom stains on the bed sheets and the bathroom stains on a nightgown that was supposed to have been cleaned. This suggests JonBenet may have had a bathroom accident that night and got up to change clothes, which would explain the soiled pajama pants found in the bathroom turned inside out. When we consider digestion and the fact that the pineapple would have been eaten well after dinner at the White's house, here's what's particularly significant. The pineapple was the only thing found in JonBenet's stomach. If we were to speculate that she ate it at the White's house, we'd face a serious problem. JonBenet also ate cracked crab there. When we examine her digestive tract, there's nothing resembling cracked crab. How can the digestive tract show only pineapple but not the other food? If JonBenet's body was processing food, all of it would progress through the system together, especially something acidic. Pineapple takes approximately 30 to 40 minutes to move into the small intestine. If she was at the White's house and waited 2 hours before coming home, that pineapple would have moved through her system alongside the cracked crab. But we don't see any other food. Only this one thing, which the Ramseys tried to argue she ate at the White's house. This absence of other food undermines the theory that anything remained from the dinner party. We have to consider that JonBenet had the pineapple at home later. We don't know whether she went to sleep that night and woke up, or whether she was lying in bed and never got to sleep before having an accident. But the biological evidence strongly suggests late night consumption at home. This conflict instantly placed the timing of the incident into question, and consequently amplified the scrutiny upon the family members who were supposedly asleep during this new time frame. The complexity of the pineapple evidence became an immediate focus for detectives. In the 1998 interview with Lou Smith and Mike Kane, John Ramsey confirms that the pineapple issue had been widely discussed in the tabloids and on television, confirming its high-profile status in the media. John Ramsey further details that Detective Haney consistently pressed him on the possibility that he had fed JonBenet pineapple after arriving home. Detective Lou Smith framed the pineapple as a crucial clue in the case that needed to be answered. The existence of the pineapple in JonBenet's system, when coupled with the bowl left on the counter, suggested an unexplained awakening and interaction in the middle of the night, a break in the timeline that demanded accountability. The timeline shift imposed by the pineapple transforms the narrative from an overnight incident to an event rooted in the mysterious waking hours of the early morning. It is a biological fact challenging a human account, illustrating the difficulty police experienced trying to find a clear path forward when the physiological clock pointed away from the told story. Psychologically, this creates what's known as cognitive dissonance for the family, the mental discomfort of holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. They know what they remember, They know what they claim happened, yet the evidence suggests something entirely different. For the innocent, this creates anguish and confusion. For those with something to conceal, this creates the need for increasingly elaborate explanations. 3. The implication, fingerprints, psychology, and the mind of deception. The psychological dimension of the pineapple evidence centers on two questions: who provided the fruit and what was the ensuing conflict? The documentary highlights that forensic analysis found the fingertips of both Patsy Ramsey and Burke Ramsey on the bowl, though JonBenet's fingerprints were not present. This led experts in the documentary to develop a theory that JonBenet may have simply snatched one piece with her fingers, which would explain the lack of her prints on the servingware. However, Burke Ramsey's lawsuit filing dismisses this wildly false and speculative conclusion. From a criminal psychology perspective, the absence of JonBenet's fingerprints on the bowl or spoon is fascinating. If she was served the pineapple by someone else, her prints wouldn't be on the serving vessels, only on whatever she touched to eat. But the spoon's presence is curious. Why would a spoon be there if it wasn't used? This suggests either the person who prepared the snack expected it would be used, or the spoon was left from a previous use and coincidentally appeared in the scene. But let's examine the intruder theory that was circulated. The idea that someone so familiar to JonBenet entered the home and she was comfortable enough not to react, allowing this person to feed her pineapple. If we entertain this scenario, however improbable, wouldn't JonBenet's fingerprints be on something? If she was eating with a spoon, her prints would be on that spoon. If she was eating with her fingers, the bowl might have her prints along the rim or side where she reached in. The spoon implies a used utensil. But if JonBenet was prone to eating pineapple without a spoon, she would have just picked pieces from the bowl with her fingers. So if this supposed familiar person knew JonBenet well, why provide a spoon she apparently didn't use? If this person knew the family's patterns, why set up a formal snack scenario that doesn't match the evidence, unless the spoon was already there as part of a table setting? But John didn't simply say, "We keep the table set with utensils." Instead, he leads us to believe the spoon's presence is unusual and out of place. So if they don't keep the table set and the spoon ended up there, that means someone deliberately retrieved it, a conscious, intentional act. Someone thought, "I need a spoon for this," went to the drawer, selected one, and placed it in the bowl. That's not random, that's purposeful behavior being downplayed as insignificant. In the criminal mind, these details matter profoundly. Criminologists who study offender behavior understand that every action at a scene tells a story. Was the scene staged? Was it spontaneous? Did the person responsible try to create a narrative or simply react to chaos? The most profound psychological implication arose during an interview involving Burke Ramsey, the then 9-year-old brother, which was later highlighted in the documentary, and Burke's legal filings. When Detective Schuler showed Burke a photograph of the dining room table with the bowl of fruit and tea, Burke appeared evasive. In the documentary excerpt, Burke describes the bowl as something that looks like glass with a tea bag in it and suggested it looked like fruit, but struggled to say what it was, noting that a large spoon wouldn't be in cereal. Jim Clemente, an FBI profiler in the documentary, interprets this response, stating that Burke looks like he's about to jump out of his seat and that he thought Burke was aware that that piece of pineapple in JonBenet's stomach actually creates a major problem in terms of the timeline. This alleged behavioral shift under questioning became highly scrutinized by investigators who believed the family was responsible, trying to find definitive evidence of a cover-up. From a psychological standpoint, child interviews are notoriously difficult to interpret. Children don't process questions the same way adults do. A 9-year-old being questioned by authority figures about a tragic event involving his sister would naturally display anxiety, regardless of guilt or innocence. The tendency to read evasiveness as guilt is a common investigative pitfall, what psychologists call confirmation bias, where we see what we expect to see rather than what's actually there. However, Burke's apparent reluctance to identify the pineapple is curious. It's a simple object. He would have seen pineapple countless times. Why the hesitation? Some psychologists suggest this could indicate dissociation, a mental separation from traumatic memories where even ordinary objects become difficult to name when they're connected to the trauma. Others suggest it indicates knowledge that the pineapple is significant and a calculated attempt to distance himself from it. This evidence became the centerpiece of the theory posited by James Kolar, as quoted in the documentary, creating a motive for an otherwise senseless act. The hypothesis states that Patsy Ramsey remained downstairs after returning home, serving Burke the tea and the pineapple, accounting for the prints and physical evidence. Then, the theory suggests that if Burke Ramsey was upset about circumstances or Christmas presents, he probably would have been upset about her trying to snag a piece of pineapple. Out of anger, he may have reacted in a way that led to tragic consequences with a flashlight. Although presented as a conclusion, Burke Ramsey's legal response notes this as an inherently improbable accusation, particularly that a 9-year-old would play a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with Detective Schuler regarding the forensic significance of the fruit. Philosophically, this raises disturbing questions about how we construct narratives of responsibility. We desperately want crimes to make sense, to follow logical patterns of motive, opportunity, and means. The pineapple theory provides all three. Burke had opportunity, late night access, means the flashlight was in the home, and motive, sibling rivalry over a snack. It's a complete narrative package, but completeness doesn't equal truth. The French philosopher Albert Camus wrote about the absurd, the human need to find meaning in a universe that often provides none. We construct elaborate theories because the alternative, that horrible things happen without clear cause or reason, is psychologically intolerable. The pineapple becomes not just evidence, but a vessel into which we pour our need for understanding. Anthropologically, sibling conflict over food is as old as human society itself. Sharing resources, especially desirable foods, is a fundamental source of childhood conflict across cultures. Every parent recognizes the battle over the last cookie, the preferred snack, the bigger portion, but does that universal dynamic escalate to serious confrontation? In the vast majority of cases, no. Siblings fight, certainly, but those conflicts almost never result in permanent consequences. Yet, in the criminal mind, particularly a young, developing mind, the calculations are different. Impulse control, consequence forecasting, emotional regulation, all these executive functions are still developing in children and adolescents. A 9-year-old doesn't think, if I do this, here are the potential outcomes. They react. They respond to immediate frustration with immediate action. The developmental neuroscience supports this. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment and impulse control, doesn't fully mature until the mid-20s. So could a child, frustrated and impulsive, react to a sibling taking their snack? Developmentally, yes, the capacity exists. But would that reaction involve grabbing a heavy flashlight and using significant force? That requires a level of intent and follow-through that goes beyond typical childhood impulse. That's where the theory becomes problematic from a forensic psychology standpoint. The pineapple, therefore, is not merely a piece of fruit. It is the physical manifestation of the investigative dilemma, becoming a psychological battleground upon which contradictory theories of motive and timing were waged. The need to establish why the child was awake and eating led investigators down paths rooted in speculation about jealousy and accidental confrontation, highlighting the persistent human need for a clean, coherent motive, even when the evidence itself is muddled. In the mind of a criminal, or in this case, a potential young offender, the pineapple represents something much more complex than a snack. It represents control, territory, possession. To a child experiencing intense emotions, perhaps jealousy over Christmas presents, resentment over attention, or simply the raw frustration of being tired and overstimulated, a sibling taking their food without asking could feel like a profound violation. Criminal psychologists understand that motive doesn't have to be proportional to outcome. People have reacted intensely to seemingly minor provocations throughout history. Road rage incidents result in serious confrontations over perceived slights that to an outside observer seem trivial. Domestic situations escalate over dishes left in the sink or temperature settings on a thermostat. It's not the objective significance of the trigger, it's the subjective meaning attached to it by the person in that moment. But here's what troubles investigators. The pineapple scenario requires not just a momentary impulse, but a sustained sequence of actions and decisions. Someone had to get the pineapple from wherever it was stored. Someone had to get a bowl. Someone had to get a spoon. Someone had to cut or prepare the fruit. These are deliberate sequential actions that suggest a calm, purposeful state, not the explosive rage that would be needed to explain what followed. Unless there were two different emotional states. First, the calm preparation of a snack, perhaps as a peace offering or a late night comfort ritual. Then something shifts, something goes wrong. A confrontation begins. And in that confrontation, the same hands that prepared the snack reach for something else, something heavy, something close, something that becomes an instrument of unimaginable consequence. Forensic criminologists study what's called crime scene staging versus spontaneous disorganization. A stage scene is deliberate, calculated, designed to mislead investigators. A spontaneous scene shows panic, chaos, reactive decision making. The pineapple bowl, left out in plain sight, doesn't fit typical staging behavior. If someone were trying to cover up what happened, why leave that evidence sitting there? Why not dispose of it, clean it up, put it away? This suggests either 1. The person responsible didn't recognize the pineapple as evidence, indicating possible youth or lack of criminal sophistication, or the pineapple genuinely wasn't part of the critical sequence of events, and its presence is coincidental to the tragedy that unfolded. The philosophical weight of the pineapple extends beyond this single case. It represents the limits of certainty in criminal investigation. We have biological evidence, indisputable, scientific, measurable. We have physical evidence, fingerprints, a bowl, a spoon. We have testimonial evidence, family statements, interviews, behavioral observations. And yet, even with all these data points, we cannot construct an unassailable narrative that accounts for every piece. This is the fundamental challenge of truth seeking. Evidence can tell us what happened, but it struggles to tell us why. The pineapple can tell us JonBenet ate fruit late at night. It can tell us Patsy and Burke touched the bowl. It can tell us approximately when her digestive process was interrupted. But it cannot tell us who put that fruit in front of her, what words were exchanged, what emotions were present, or what sequence of decisions led to tragedy. In the end, the pineapple endures as the case's most frustrating enigma, a simple, domestic detail that became a symbol of all the questions that remain unanswered. It is evidence that both reveals and conceals, that provides timestamps while obscuring agency, that offers facts while withholding meaning. For those seeking justice, the pineapple represents both hope and despair. Hope that such specific evidence must eventually yield its secrets, and despair that even the most concrete physical facts can support multiple competing interpretations. It reminds us that in criminal investigation, as in life, certainty is often an illusion, and the truth we seek may forever remain just beyond our grasp, visible, tangible, yet ultimately elusive in its deeper significance.